Most people think they know the most fearsome Native American tribes. The Apache, the Comanche, the Sioux. But what if I told you those weren't even the scariest ones? Hidden deep in the corners of history are tribes so brutal, so clever and so terrifying, even their enemies whispered their names with dread. These were warriors who didn't just fight to survive, they fought to dominate, to break their enemies spiritually, and to vanish into legend. Today, we're diving into the terrifying side of Native American history. But be warned, this is the side of history they don't teach in school. The Tonkawa, the cannibal tribe of Texas. Let's start in Texas. The Tonkawa were feared not for their numbers or weapons but for their appetite. According to countless tribal and settler accounts, the Tonkawa didn't just defeat their enemies, they ate them. Ritualistic cannibalism was central to their identity. It wasn't about survival, it was about power. By consuming their fallen enemies, they believed they absorbed their strength, their spirit, and their fear. Even neighboring tribes avoided conflict with the Tonkawa, not out of respect but out of raw, visceral terror. Eventually, their practices made them a target. The Texas Rangers, along with rival tribes like the Comanche and Apache, turned on them. By the late 1800s, the Tonkawa were nearly wiped out. But their reputation as the cannibal tribe still haunts the Southwest. The Yuchi, warriors possessed by the sun. Next up are the Yuchi tribe, whose warfare was guided by something far more terrifying than tactics: prophecy. The Yuchi believed they were the direct descendants of the sun. This wasn't just myth, it shaped everything they did, especially in battle. They practiced something that early European observers described as ghost dances, spiritual ceremonies before war where warriors would become possessed by ancestral spirits. To outsiders, it looked like madness. Warriors foamed at the mouth, shouted in unknown tongues, and moved like they were already dead. Other tribes thought they were unkillable, cursed. And when they did die, it wasn't quietly. The Yuchi had elaborate rituals involving fire, spirit release, and vengeance. Anyone who dared slay a Yuchi risked spiritual retaliation. Their numbers were never massive, but their enemies rarely forgot what it felt like to face warriors who believed they couldn't die. The Modoc to 60 versus 1,000. Now let us talk about what might be one of the most lopsided and embarrassing battles in American military history. The Modoc tribe, based in Northern California and Southern Oregon, weren't large. But when the U.S. government tried to force them onto reservations in the 1870s, things went sideways fast. Roughly 60 Modoc warriors, led by a tactical genius named Captain Jack, retreated into a twisted maze of lava tubes now known as the lava beds. It was the perfect natural fortress. From there, they held off over 1,000 U.S. soldiers for months. The soldiers couldn't see them, couldn't find them, and every approach turned into a bloodbath. At one point, Captain Jack even lured General Edward Canby to peace talks, and then assassinated him on the spot. It was the first and only time a U.S. general was killed during Indian Wars negotiations. The government was humiliated, and even though the Modoc were eventually overwhelmed, they became a symbol of resistance and ruthlessness. The Haida, the Vikings of the Pacific. Ever heard of the Haida? Probably not. But if you lived anywhere along the Pacific Northwest in the 1700s or 1800s, they were your worst nightmare. The Haida were maritime raiders, seafarers with canoes the size of small ships. Carved from single cedar trees, these massive war canoes could carry over 50 warriors. They would raid villages hundreds of miles away, snatching people, looting homes, and burning everything in sight, then vanish across the waves before anyone could retaliate. They took slaves, traded them, and built their wealth on fear. Even Russian and British explorers documented their ferocity. The Haida weren't just warriors, they were elite naval tacticians, tribal pirates with no mercy. Their terrifying raids only stopped when smallpox devastated their population. But for over a century, they ruled the seas like the Vikings of North America. The Chichimeca, the skull collectors, head south of the border to Mexico, and you'll meet the Chichimeca name that Spanish conquistadors spoke with dread. They didn't have towering temples or golden cities. What they had was blood. The Chichimeca fought a 40-year war against the Spanish and made their conquest of northern Mexico a living nightmare. Their specialty, hit-and-run raids, poison-tipped arrows, ambushes that left entire garrisons wiped out. They didn't care for diplomacy. They weren't interested in conversion. They wanted the invaders gone, and they had no problem displaying the skulls of their enemies as a warning. At one point, the Spanish actually gave up on trying to convert them. That's how brutal it got. The Kynai, warriors of the dream world, part of the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Kynai, also known as the Blood Tribe, were warriors of a different kind. Their weapons weren't just physical, they were spiritual. Kynai warriors were dream-guided killers. Before battle, they underwent intense rituals to receive visions from the spirit world. Those visions told them who to fight, how to fight, and when to strike. Scalping was sacred. The scalps of enemies weren't just trophies, they were preserved, honored, and believed to hold the spirit of the defeated. To fight a Kynai wasn't just to risk death, it was to risk having your soul imprisoned, your name erased, your memory devoured by the tribe's shamans, the Iroquois, masters of torture and diplomacy. Now let's talk about the ones who truly mastered the art of psychological warfare. The Iroquois Confederacy wasn't just a single tribe, it was a league of 6 nations known for their political savvy and their terrifying torture rituals. They practiced morning wars, raids to capture enemies and replace their own dead. But here's the twist. If you were captured, you were either adopted into the tribe or subjected to some of the most elaborate torture ever recorded. Burning, flaying, bone breaking, all done with ritual calmness, sometimes lasting days. And the victims? Expected to endure it with stoicism. If they screamed, they were weak. If they smiled through the pain, they were honored. Even rival tribes feared being taken alive. The Iroquois weren't savage, they were systematic. These weren't random acts of violence. These were complex systems of warfare, belief, and power designed not just to win battles, but to dominate minds. What made these tribes so terrifying wasn't just how they fought, but why. They believed the spiritual world was watching, that their ancestors were guiding them, and that fear itself was a weapon to be mastered. Many of these tribes were nearly erased by colonization, war, or disease, but their legends, those still echo across the land. So next time someone says they know all about Native American warriors, ask them if they've ever heard of the cannibals, the lava-bed ghosts, or the skull collectors. Chances are they haven't, and now you have.